Hi, this is Ed Mumford from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I play at historic Ellis Park Golf Course here in Cedar Rapids. This is Golf Smarter number 969.
You must know this, and I'm sure your listeners know this from their own experience. When somebody takes a practice swing, it can be beautiful, effortless, fluid, perfectly balanced, lovely follow through. And literally seconds later, when they step up to the ball for real to hit the shot, everything goes wrong. And of course, the mainstream industry wants to fix that from the outside in, saying, oh, you didn't do this and you didn't do that, and all about technique. But if you take notice of yourself in your practice swing, maybe you're breathing deeply, maybe you're balanced properly, maybe your shoulders are empty and relaxed. Maybe you're not clenching your jaw. Maybe you're not gripping that 4-iron too tight. And then what changes in you? What changes in the golfer when you step up to hit the ball for real? Because the golf swing is only ever an outward manifestation of whatever's going on in the golfer.
Lack of awareness leads to increased tension, which leads to poor results. With Jayne Storey.
This is Golf Smarter, sharing stories, tips, and insights from great golf minds to help you lower your score and raise your golf IQ. Here's your host, Fred Green.
Welcome back to the Golf Smarter podcast, Jayne.
Hello, Fred. It's great to see you again, and thank you very much for asking me back.
Absolutely. A new book came out. I've got to have you back on because we always like to go deep into this conversation that we've had multiple times, but it continues to develop as your writings continue to develop. Tell us about the new book.
Well, just to put what you've said in context, I was looking at a book that I wrote in 2019, which is Breathe Golf. And I was reading a chapter, trying to put together a newsletter. And I thought, well, actually, if I wrote this chapter again now, I would approach it slightly differently. Because my understanding and my insights, I suppose, from my own daily practice, they continue to develop. So it's a journey that doesn't stop. And I have students and readers who've told me that they've read my previous books maybe 6 times and that they understand more about what I'm trying to convey with my message, the more they commit to their own daily performance practice. So it's quite interesting. This new book, you asked me to hold it up, so here it is. It's called The Athlete's Ascent. And it's all about the relationship between deep practice and high performance.
And it's available now.
It is available now. It's on audio, Kindle, and also on paperback.
Did you read the audiobook?
I did. I read everything.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah. Now you mentioned the journey a moment ago.
Yes.
What's the destination?
I think it's greater self-awareness and self-understanding. And I don't mean that on an ego level or a personality level, but I mean something deeper than that. And it is a journey that doesn't stop, but a more self-awareness. And I think this is so important because we're so caught up in technology and devices and this AI, which I don't use on my Zoom calls. I think there's a whole danger of dumbing down human intelligence rather than allowing us to expand our intelligence and our gifts and our potential. But there's a lack of self-awareness. For instance, I had to go to the bank earlier. There is one surviving bank in the town because all the others are closed. But when I walked back, I was behind a lady, a young woman, and she had a baby, a tiny baby, in a cot that she was carrying in one arm, but she had her phone in the other hand. So she was paying more attention to the phone, and the baby was kind of dangling, and the angle at which she was holding it, I was looking, the baby had a strap across it, but she had no awareness of the baby. It was all in the phone. And this is the sort of narrowing and dumbing down of the human condition. And the journey, the destination is to reclaim one's attention and to develop greater self-awareness.
I may push back on dumbing down. I put it more of as a distraction than dumbing down, because the amount of information that's at our fingertips at any given moment is far superior than we've ever had in history. So I'm not sure if I would use dumbing down in that sense, but correct me if you see it a different way.
I suppose it depends on what arena. I mean, information, yes, is great. Information for its own sake is not so good.
And communication.
Yeah. But let's say for golfers, and this new book, The Athlete's Ascent, is for tennis players, skiers, swimmers, all sports. Knowing more and more about technique, having more information, does not enable one to be a greater athlete. In fact, that is a hindrance. So it really depends on the area that we're speaking about.
Yeah.
I mean, my speciality, I guess my obsession through my life has been the performance of complex movement, like the golf swing or the tennis serve. And it's only when the mind is quiet that the body can perform in the way that it really wants to naturally.
And the phone is definitely not helping your mind get quiet.
No, not at all. I think it's Dr. Izzy Justice. I think it's him. He's a neuroscientist, I believe.
We've had him on the show.
Have you? Yes. A lot of my students are interested in his work. I'm more about the practice of meditation than studying the neuroscience of it. But anyway, I think it's Izzy who said that the mind of teenagers and young people now would be considered the schizophrenic mind back in the 1950s and 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Scrolling through and having more and more bite-sized chunks of information. But anyway, maybe are we getting...
we go all over the place. Don't worry about it.
Okay. But it is...
Go ahead.
It is something to consider when people come to read my books. So we've got Breathe Golf, Connected Golf, and now The Athlete's Ascent. And many people wish to be quieter inside, and they wish to quieten the mind and take up this journey of self-awareness and self-exploration. And the way they come to it often is that they've used a mindfulness app. But I do try to wean people off that and put the phone away, put the device away, and just sit quietly with yourself. So maybe it's that's kind of missing, from human society.
It's interesting. I'm recently been using an electric caddy during my rounds of golf.
Right.
And I've been testing 2 different units out, and one of them has a screen on it that gives me relevant information to my golf game, but also it's Bluetooth enabled. So my messages and emails and phone calls pop up on the screen. And I've had to turn that off. I just found it too distracting to be able to focus on my game. And it's like, I don't want to, if it's something for my wife or my children, sure, I want to know about it right now, but they'll get in touch with me. But all the other stuff was just noise, and I really was not thrilled with it.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I was talking to a PGA pro at one of the local clubs here, and he said that as pros now, they're advised to put their scores, their round, on an app on the phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he said every time he takes his phone out of his pocket, there's a work email or something from his wife and the children, or, it's distracting. And he didn't want to do it. He wanted to have a card and a pencil and write his scores down. Yeah.
You get into your own habits too. You get into the way you do things and you're comfortable with them. And again, it's a distraction.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So this book, Athlete's Ascent, goes beyond just your first two books were golf related. And now you're taking it on a broader scope to athletes. That's right. Is that because you're working with a more diverse group of athletes, not golfers?
Yes, I've always worked with athletes from many different sports right from the beginning. But it seemed that it was, 80% of, or 70 or 80% of those students or clients were golfers. So I decided to concentrate on breathe golf and connected golf to start with. So breathe golf is really about quietening the mind with formal traditional meditation practice, because when the mind is quiet, the body can move more freely. And there's a connection between the meditative state and getting in flow. And then connected golf was about my lifelong experience in the martial arts, particularly Tai Chi, which I've practiced since 1987. And it was about certain principles of movement, fundamental movement principles from Tai Chi that apply to golf. But exploring that for other athletes, it was quite a natural jump, because a lot of people think when they take up golf, they have to learn a whole new set of movements. And I think that can be, I don't think that's quite true. I think a lot of people overcomplicate golf. In fact, I've heard of some experts who divide the golf swing, which is 1.8 seconds of movement, they divide that into 100 different moves. So here we're back to, too much information. But it's interesting, the timing of the book, because we've seen tennis players who retire and take up golf, and they're brilliant at it. I mean, have you ever seen Martina Navratilova's golf swing? I mean, it's fantastic. Rafael Nadal, now Andy Murray. So there are fundamental movement skills which are common across all sports. And, of course, we can train those movements in the martial arts particularly, and then apply those movements that we've learned to whatever sport we're doing. And in fact, Navratilova, she said at one point that an athlete, a true athlete, should be able to turn their hand to any sport. So you can ski, you can swim, you can play tennis, you can shoot or whatever. It seems quite right to me, wouldn't you say?
There are some athletes that do pick up golf quite naturally, and they're incredible at it. And then there are some, like we've had this Charles Barkley, fiasco watching him play golf and how difficult it is. And it's like, why is this not a coordinated movement? You would think that athletes can just transition into golf as a life sport so they can continue playing, and as social, as well as just being a sport, but also the social element to it. you'd see that it's an easy transition for them.
Did Michael Jordan take up golf as well?
Oh, Michael Jordan is an incredible golfer.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
And Steph Curry is,
Oh, really?
Yeah, Steph Curry has tried to play on the minor circuit. He played in the web.com.
Wow.
But, he talks about once he's finished playing basketball professionally, that golf is his next step.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but Michael Jordan is a serious gambler. So like he'll play rounds of golf for $100,000 and probably more. We've heard rumors of such.
Goodness me. Didn't Phil Mickelson go down that route at one time as well?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. He loves, golf's a gambling game. I mean, for many people that's the start.
Money.
Yeah. It's very funny. How was the response to your first two books? And is that what motivates you to continue to write a new book?
The response is, I suppose it's a bit like, I'm trying to think of a comparison, say Joni Mitchell. She sort of complained early in her career that her records weren't selling and she wasn't mainstream. But then on reflection, she's like, well, actually, I didn't want to be a human jukebox, and her stuff is positioned slightly outside of the mainstream.
Absolutely.
And I would say my work is the same. It's always very well received, but it's not why I do what I do. I do what I do because it's been a lifelong fascination of mine. I was very shy, very introverted when I was a child and a young woman. In fact, even until I was in my mid-30s, I was very shy, very introverted. And I've spent a long time overcoming that. So I understand when people are nervous. I understand what performance anxiety is all about. And I've been trying to write about that from my experience of meditation and the martial arts, and going beyond this psychological approach, the mental game approach, which has been around for the last 50 years. So I'm trying to bring something new. But, my books are very well received. I mean, they've got 4.5 stars. The new one's got 5 stars on Amazon. And great
congratulations.
Reviews. Well, yeah, but, it's not everybody's cup of tea, because not everybody can do what I'm suggesting they do or would want to. Right.
But we want to make this relevant to golfers today. But I'm curious to ask you about your shyness and introversion. How you feel like you did come out. I consider myself an outgoing introvert.
Okay.
Right. So that if you put me in a situation where I know people, in a group situation and I know the people, I'm quite outgoing. But if you put me in a group situation where I don't know people, but maybe my wife knows everybody there, but which is regularly the case, that she knows a lot more people than I do. But I'll find myself just being to myself. I don't walk up to people and start chatting and things. It's,
Yeah. I suppose teaching is what brought me out of myself.
Sure.
I was asked, around, I don't know, maybe 1995, 97, I was asked by some of my friends if I'd show them some Tai Chi moves. So I hired a little hall and I started showing them a bit of Tai Chi. And I can remember so many times in my life where things were difficult, or I had to move house, or relationship broke up, or even, when I would lose people. I've lost my mum and dad. I've lost my best friend, another friend. But driving to a class, this is all pre-COVID days because now everything's on Zoom, but driving to a class, even if I felt worried or anxious about something in myself or upset, it was all about teaching, it was all for that. So that's really what's brought me out of myself. But I have a practice, and that is what I'm trying to bring to people, is a daily performance practice based on traditional ways and traditional methods of seated meditation, standing meditation, slow motion exercises, breathing exercises, self-awareness, self-observation, all of these things. So I practice what I preach. And all of that helps. I can still be introverted, but I can speak about my subject.
Right. Interesting. The slow motion practice, especially in golf, I was introduced to it early in the podcast series and found it incredibly difficult to do practice golf swing. Not when I'm on the golf course, but just when I'm practicing, to try to slow the swing down, to break it down to, a slow motion golf swing. I found it to be so challenging.
It is very challenging. And I ask people to take 30 seconds and I time them, and they'll start off quite slowly and then they kind of whiz through it, and maybe they've taken 8 or 12 seconds.
Oh, 30 seconds, 30, I couldn't imagine.
But it's the approach that needs to be slightly different with a slow motion golf swing. So you don't necessarily have to look at the swing. What's interesting about the slow motion swing is to find, where is movement initiated from? How does this movement begin? Not what I've been told, but in my own body, in my own intention, how does this movement begin? And what continues that movement? If I turn too far, do I lose the structure in my lower body? If I don't separate my upper body from my lower body, i.e. if I turn my hips too far, when does my knee start to buckle and my legs start to collapse inwards? Am I gripping the club too tightly? Do I pause at the top? Do I compress? Do I empty my body at the top? Do I see that my thoughts are going all over the place? So there's so much to learn by observing oneself, because you must know this, and I'm sure your listeners know this from their own experience. And I've stood behind golfers, watched them. When somebody takes a practice swing, it can be beautiful, effortless, fluid, perfectly balanced, lovely follow through. And literally 20 seconds later, when they step up to the ball for real to hit the shot, everything goes wrong. And of course, the mainstream industry wants to fix that from the outside in, saying, oh, you didn't do this and you didn't do that and blah, 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 all about technique. But if you take notice of yourself in your practice swing, maybe you're breathing deeply, maybe you're balanced properly, maybe your shoulders are empty and relaxed, maybe you're not clenching your jaw, maybe you're not gripping that, 4-iron too tight or whatever it is. And then what changes in you? What changes in the golfer when you step up to hit the ball for real? Because the golf swing is only ever an outward manifestation of whatever's going on in the golfer. Surely, you don't suddenly forget everything you know about technique, do you? 2 great practice swings, step up to the ball, oh God, it all goes wrong. Why is that? And that's really what I'm trying to answer in my books.
So I do want to talk about this book because I've been enjoying reading it. And there's some things that jumped out to me that I wanted to pursue with you even deeper. And that's even early on in the book, you say the harder you try and the more active your mind, the more disjointed or disconnected your movements become.
Yes, I do say that.
You did. Now that I've said it, I want you to talk about that.
Yeah,
I want you to talk about that.
I think when people have had a wonderful experience of being in the flow state, and I know that I've had that experience in meditation, in running, when I was a bit younger, in swimming, walking through the park, and people I'm sure listening have had that experience in golf. When that experience arises, the mind is invariably quiet. And there's a beautiful connection between the mind and the body, which is what these Eastern practices that I'm encouraging people to develop in a daily performance practice is what they're all about. For instance, when you sit in meditation, you are aware of your breathing, but that subtly changes your posture and it quietens the mind. So in the East, they don't have the mind in one camp and the body in another camp, as we do here. There's your psychologist, your mental game coach, there's your technical coach. In the East, in karate, in kung fu, in swordsmanship, in calligraphy, in the tea ceremony in Japan, in archery, they would think that's absolutely ludicrous. So if we wish to bring the mind and the body together, we need to quieten the mind because it wants to take over. It thinks it's playing golf, and really it isn't. So the mind has one job and the body has a different job. The mind is for the thinking mind. The analytical mind is for thinking, organizing, processing, ticking things off your to-do list, analyzing your swing when you're on the range. Perfect. But when you want to release your swing in an effortless way in the middle of a game, that analytical mind must be subdued so that the signal about, or the intention that you have for the shot, the signal is not captured by the prefrontal cortex, which wants to analyze and get it right and have this list of things that you need to accomplish in order to get that shot. Because in the flow state, it's just going to happen. You balance perfectly, you're moving perfectly, lower body's nice and stable, the upper body's fluid, you hit perfectly, you accelerate through the shot, everything's great. So it's all about, in my work, is all about creating that ideal performance state before you start moving. And part of that is to quieten the mind.
And I'm curious because you even mentioned before that, the golf swing is 1.8 seconds. In the mind, there's during that time, there's we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. We tighten our bodies. We're not as loose as we should be because you only get this one shot to hit this ball the way you want, to hopefully you have intention in this shot and you follow through on that intention. But then afterwards, so quieting the mind there is one point, but the other part is afterwards, as you're going to, the shot is complete and you're going to your ball for the next one, there's a lot of noise in your mind then too. And that's minutes worth that creates more tension and more pressure on you for the next shot.
That's how the majority of people approach golf, but there is a different way to approach it.
Awesome.
Yeah. So if you have a daily performance practice, let's say you develop a performance practice of 15 to 20 minutes, can be longer, but let's say 15 to 20 minutes to start with, where you sit quietly and you follow your breathing, just like the Buddhist monks do. Quietly, aware of the center of the body, aware of your posture, seeing the thoughts coming back to your breathing. No gimmicks, no gadgets, no apps, just you and your breathing. Or you practice standing meditation. So you become keenly aware of your body and your posture, your balance. Maybe you practice slow walking. Maybe you do breathing exercises. Maybe you practice intentional self-awareness. Maybe you build up a practice which contains some of all of these things. And then maybe you go on to develop a specific organization of these practices before tournaments. You might have rest days, like when I've worked with tour players, they'll have seated meditation on days that they're traveling, but days that they're competing, they'll ramp up their practice and do maybe standing, like Qigong training. So therefore, instead of your mind, deconstructing the shot and thinking of all the things that went wrong and all the things that you can fix, when you're walking down the fairway, you can open yourself to nature, be aware of your surroundings, have some kind of joy and gratitude for being out there, become more self-aware, reflect, okay, so my shoulders were a bit tight last time, I rushed, I need to slow down, my mind was too busy. So rather than criticizing the golf swing and saying, this was wrong, that was wrong, I've got to fix that, rather become intentionally self-aware, curious about your own self. Did I rush? Was I balanced properly? Was I in my center? Because there's a beautiful quote that I put in the Athlete's Ascent, which is from a Tai Chi master, Master Kai, spelled C-A-I, Master Kai. And it's about when we are aware, we are relaxed. As soon as I become self-aware, I relax. And maybe you have to practice that for some time. But awareness is, I'm aware of my body, I'm comfortably in my body, and my body is relaxed. And if I stay with that, then my chest empties, the shoulders relax. Now I'm breathing down into my lower abdomen, and so it goes. Lack of awareness leads to tension. Lack of awareness is my thoughts are now taking over. I'm thinking about what I'm going to do when I get up to this ball, all the things that my coach told me, all the things that I've got to fix. I've got to keep my head down. I've got to turn more through the ball. I've got to shift my weight. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. So really what I'm advocating is a different game. It's the same game, but it's a different approach to the game.
Absolutely. It's the same game, but it's a very different approach, because then it's not just when you're on the practice range or not when you're just on the golf course. It's a life practice.
Exactly. And this is what makes it so seamless, because you're doing the same practices in the morning in your lounge or your office or wherever, driving to the golf club, standing over the ball, walking down the fairway, at home with your partner in the evening. It's the same thing. And this is what makes it so powerful, because you're building up reserves of attention, of awareness, of inner relaxation, of calm. It's a lifetime deal. Yes, for sure.
So many professional athletes we'll talk about professional athletes that you've worked with, are young people. I mean, at most they're in their early 30s, right? And with the success that they've had throughout their lives to get them to a point of being a professional athlete, which is elite status right there, they're pretty, I don't want to say cocky or arrogant about what they do and how they do it, but they probably think they have all the answers. So I'm just curious as to the resistance that you get from them for trying to do a life practice on something that would slow their energy down and center it. Does that happen?
It is tricky because the ego often gets in the way.
Yeah,
it really does. And I'm not going to give any names, of course, but I have worked with people and taken them from Q school, right up to winning majors and being part of elite teams in the space of 2 or 3 seasons. And then, of course, they think, oh, I've got that now. I know everything. And, they decide that they can carry on their own. And in the last season, their whole game's just, gone south. So we do have to be very careful. And I mean, I've had a lot of teachers in my life. I have been practicing for a very long time, and I practice every day. And I think it's important for people, if they're going to talk about meditation in any way, shape or form, that they have a practice. Otherwise, and most people don't, otherwise it becomes a psychological approach, which is, as I said a bit earlier, this is, people have approached the flow state or the zone as a psychological state. Mostly people talk about a focused mental state. And it really isn't a focused mental state. We need to find different words for it. A student of mine earlier today, he coined a term. He said it was a mixture of awareness and intuition. Other people talk about a sense of knowing, another person recently has talked about a faith and a belief that they can make that shot. So it is not of mental focus. But unless one has a performance practice, a daily practice of quietening the mind, it's very difficult to understand that, which is why I said at the beginning, if I wrote my Breathe Golf again, I'd write it differently because I've had, another 8 years of practice on top of that. Not to say that it's not totally valid still, because it is. And why people read the books again and again and again.
Which is a beautiful thing. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. There's a lot of work's gone into it.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, my wife wrote a book and everyone keeps saying, so when you're writing your next one? She's like, I can't do another book. So the fact that you've done 3 now is on this topic is pretty remarkable. Pretty remarkable indeed. Congratulations. Yeah. Let's talk about stillness.
Okay.
I'm just going to open the door like that because, I've had other golf instructors talk about stillness in the body, in the mind, in the swing, leading up to the swing. But I want to get your take on stillness, especially your line about stillness is the master of motion. It's so powerful of a statement.
Well, that's a line from the Tai Chi classics, where they say stillness is the master of motion. And it is, if you apply it to golf, as I've said and I've written about, most golf coaches, most people deconstruct the golf swing after the golfer has performed the golf swing. So all the coaches will say, oh, you didn't do this, or you didn't do that properly, or you forgot that, or this wasn't right, or that wasn't right. And they try to tinker with the swing as if it was a machine with so many moving parts. We fiddle with this, we'll tighten that screw, we'll loosen that, we'll change that. And as I've said many times, it's the quality of the setup, the quality of this relaxed readiness that I talk about, like a kung fu warrior would have a sense of relaxed readiness in the body before they deliver a punch or fight or whatever. The same in archery, a relaxed readiness. In golf, uptightness and a checklist, which is where most people approach it from. But stillness, like everything else, I mean, people can talk about it, but to train it, to practice it, or to actually find it in oneself, you may need to go through a period of weeks or months or longer to quieten down all the stuff that goes on, all the noise, as you mentioned noise before, all that chatter. It's behind, underneath all that chatter. It's not in the chatter.
It's interesting because I loved how you use the word, you find it. It's not like a manifestation, or you cannot create it. You have to find it.
Yes, and you do. And also, when is very, very subtle, because if somebody says, I'm going to quieten my mind, I'm going to sit in meditation, I'm going to quieten my mind, it's not quite the right way of articulating what actually happens. When I sit in meditation, if I bring my awareness continually back to my breathing, my mind will quieten down. There's a completely different way of expressing it based on having a practice, rather than people saying it's a highly focused mental, form of mental attention or mental focus. So in my books and with my students and clients, I really try to get people to express, what is it that you mean? What do you mean? What is the right word to use for this? Because it makes a big difference.
It really does. And I can imagine there's people, listeners who are like, yeah, that's not for me, but it might be. It could be for you, but you got to try it. You got to start with the first step.
I think in years to come, maybe long after I'm, dead and gone, I think it will be where athletes are. It has to be. Because if everybody in the Eastern world, all the Tai Chi guys, all the Kung Fu guys, all the karate guys, all the samurai warriors, all the archers on horseback, all of these traditions, Zen Buddhism, Kalari, the amazing Indian martial art, they're all based on intention and the body trained in this a way that's relaxed but ready, so it can respond to intention. But in sport, it's here's the psychologist, the mental game coach, here's the technical coach. These guys don't talk to each other. So in the golfer, the mind is doing one thing and the mind's trying to direct, and the body cannot follow because it's not meant to. The mind is not meant to direct movement, which is not to say that we cannot have an intention for movement, but intent is not the same as thinking. In fact, a Tai Chi grandmaster, a woman in this country, a Chinese lady who lives in the north of England, She once explained it as having, for intent, pure intent, the mind must be so quiet to have a very clear intention to which the body can then respond. So it's definitely a journey, and it definitely isn't for everybody right now, but maybe in the future it will be just the way things will develop. I hope so, because so many of my students and clients get that tremendous amount of joy from their golf and their sport, but also from their practice. People who resist, and then after a few weeks or months, they're like, I can't wait to sit in meditation because it's the only silence that they have in the whole day.
Oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if joy was a major part of our golf life? Because there's so much of it is frustration and anger and tension. If we can just introduce and keep joy in our game, oh, that would be wonderful. Tell us one more time the name of the book and where we can find it and your website.
The book is The Athlete's Ascent, and you can get it online or you can order it from your favorite bookstore. My website is chi-performance. I'm sure you're going to put a link there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I've now been in my business for 20 years, and I've put together all the material I've ever written, recorded and filmed for golfers. So there's a whole package there, a golf performance program. And I've also put together a performance practice guide for golf and sports. So if you want to dip your toe in the water and learn a little bit and build up a daily practice, then there's also something there for you. And I have a blog on there that goes back, 15 years or something. There's tons of material on there.
Jayne, it's always a joy and an education when we get a chance to speak. It's so great to see you again.
Thank you so much for having me back, Fred.
I want you to stay tuned over the next few weeks because we're getting ready to announce the details of our 5-round Golf Smarter adventure to the Robert Trent Jones Trail in Alabama coming up during the last weekend of March 2025. So make sure your calendars are free now because we'll only have space for 3 foursomes. Details on that will be coming up soon. I'm not sure you'll agree with me on this one, but I'm a firm believer that golf doesn't need to be made any harder than it already is, and that like guys on the tour, most of our second shots should be with an 8-iron or less. While I look at the rating and slope to determine which tees I'm going to play, I generally don't pay attention to the total yardage, so I usually play from the white tees. I probably picked that up from one of my many conversations with Terry Kaler. And this Friday on Golf Smarter Mulligans, we'll go back to a full episode from our Short Game Academy series with the Wedge Guy.
If you're playing the right tees for your skill level and your distance, you're going to hit 70 to 75% of your shots inside 9-iron range. Do you give that 75% of your practice time? If not, that's one part of your problem. Now, in 1949, Ben Hogan, in his book, said the maximum distance of a sand wedge is 40 yards. I was with a group of golfers last night that ranged from 7 to 18 handicap, and the average person there said they hit their sand wedge routinely 80 and 85 yards. I said, really? Well, then you must be twice as good as Ben Hogan because he hit his over 40. What we have in our bag that we call wedges are very short-range golf clubs, 20 to 25-yard golf clubs. But we use them in a full swing environment today. So the fact that you have distance control issues may not really be your fault. It may be the tools. I suspect because you're a new golfer, there's also some technique and probably some time issues there. But the third element of that is the tools. And if you don't have the right tools in your bag, you're not going to have good distance control.
Episode 358 was originally for members only, so it's the first time we've ever shared it publicly. You'll definitely want to check this one out. In this episode from November 2012, Terry answers more listener questions about their short game. I want to thank this week's Golf Smarter ambassador, Ed Mumford from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, who chose to receive Tony Manzoni's Lost Fundamental video just for opening today's episode. Ed plays at the historic Ellis Park Golf Course in Cedar Rapids, which is nearly 100 years old. Now you have multiple ways to become a Golf Smarter ambassador. You can record a show opening on your phone like Ed did, or record it on our toll-free Golf Smarter listener line and choose one of 3 great gifts. Or if you'd like to get all 3 gifts at once, then write a review for Golf Smarter from wherever you're listening right now. Just write an honest review and send me what you wrote and where you posted it. Once we confirm that your review is public, I'll email you instructions on how to receive your gifts. If you have any questions, comments, want to open a future episode with where you're from, where you play, and the episode number, or you've submitted a review on your favorite podcast platform, or maybe you have a suggestion for an upcoming episode, please write to golfsmarterpodcast@gmail.com.